What would you do if you got a phone call from the CEO first thing Monday morning to come and see him? Not a stop by when you get a chance today because it's Monday morning, but a Lupinacci, get your tuchus into my office now kind of summons. Well, that happened to me a few years ago when I was leading a large integration. We had just bought a $700 million company, and it was a bigger company than we had. And so I was in charge of doing all of the due diligence work to figure out how much synergy, cost savings, could we get by merging these two organizations. Which was exciting because I got to look at every single bit of data, not just the HR, the people side of things, or benefits, which a lot of times HR get involved in when there's an M&A. But I also had to work with supply chain, procurement, manufacturing, cost of goods sold, finance, IT, everything. So there was a lot of information there. And figured out, built a model, and created a synergy plan that would save $60 million, which was going to be a really good piece of the investment thesis, why we bought the company. So as I gathered my notebook to go to the CEO's office, I started to have this pit in my stomach. You ever get one of those when you get, your boss gives you a call and you go, oh no, what have I done wrong? I didn't know of anything, but perhaps I had messed up the data, messed up the synergy numbers, anything. I didn't know what to expect, because you don't want that kind of a call, certainly not first thing Monday morning. We had just closed the deal, and so as I proceeded to go to his office, I had this flashback of when I was in 5th grade and was being sent to the principal's office for doing something that I shouldn't have done in an auditorium, setting. And in that moment, when I got to the principal's office, this was still at a time when paddling little kids' bottoms was still okay in school, and he talked to me and told me to assume the position while he pulled a board about this long off of the wall to give me a paddling. By the time all of that went through my mind, I got to the CEO's office and knocked, ready to take my paddling. No good reason why, but just the tone of the CEO's voice. He motioned me in, and I sat down, ready to hear what the issue was. You see, I understood what my CEO cared about. He cared about EBITDA, right? It was a private equity-run company, and they are about EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, amortization, depreciation. Amortization. Do you know what your CEO cares about? Do you know what your executive team cares about? Well, depending on the type of company, it could be EBITDA, it could be net profit, gross profit. If you're public, it's probably earnings per share. If it's a CFO, it's probably cash flow. If it's a chief revenue officer, it's obviously revenue. A COO, it might be cost of goods sold or cost of services. Those are things that, as an HR professional, if you want to get a seat at the table, if you want to add value to the organization, you should know what the executive team really cares about. And so today, we're going to talk about those things in the data analytics space from an HR perspective of how you can truly be a value add to the business. Now, part of the challenge that HR has had in our space, and I spent the last 20 plus years in human resources, so I love HR. And a lot of times it was, early in my career, it was gut feel, right? Just be honest, right? Because it was people, and can you really get data and people together and to drive, business decisions that a CFO is going to care about? I can't tell you how many times that I sat down with finance and they said, yeah, that's great, but that's a soft savings, right? Like, hey, but I'm saving 15 minutes per person on, by doing this. Yeah, but they're just going to fill it up with something else. So I learned fairly early that I needed to figure out how to connect the dots between what the executives and finance and business care about to what we care about from a people perspective, and how do we speak that language and talk about the things that they care about. Now, the great news is there are organizations like Gartner and Gallup and McKinsey and others that have done a lot of that work for us, right? And so these are just 4 data points that you can go and Google and really be able to bring to your leadership teams and show that correlation, right? So 2.2 times higher cash flow. Well, the data suggests that strong leadership produces 2.2 times higher cash flow. Well, HR, who goes and finds the best leaders to bring into your organization? Who's developing those leaders to be the best? Right? Well, it's HR. Right? 22% higher total revenue growth is driven by organizations that have really robust talent management practices. Everything from ensuring that you're hiring top talent to developing that top talent and having that performance management and development programs. 21% higher profitability is all about strong culture. The stronger the culture, the higher the profitability of the company. Who owns culture? Well, that's a trick question, because in a lot of cases, culture should be owned by the CEO and the leadership team and every leader, but practically, HR is the steward of that culture. And then a 19% increase in operating income is really driven by engaged employees. Well, HR seems to also be the one that gets tasked to figuring out how to get the employees engaged, even though we all know that managers play a big role in that. Now, what I'd like to do today is take you on a little bit of a journey, and I'm gonna end with the last part of my presentation is going to be about the practical things that I learned as being in a chief learning officer, chief talent officer, chief integration officer. But I wanted to establish some foundations. First, with some terms that you might hear. Why HR analytics is important to HR, what we as HR professionals should be doing to get that seat at the table, leveraging the data that we have, and then we'll get into what are those key analytics, and then I even have graphical visualization of like models that I've used in real life. So I want to start with some of the foundational items. The first time that I heard the term big data, I thought it was some weird esoteric thing that someone who had a job and trying to make work for everybody else. I didn't realize that it wasn't anything really wild or crazy. Big data is nothing more than a large amount of complex information. It could be structured, it could be unstructured. HR has, depending on the size of your organization, HR has a significant amount of data. So if you just think of every employee record, what are all those different fields of information that you have to fill in, right? It could be performance. If you do talent reviews, it could be the talent review information. It could be all of their biographics, their career, benefit information. All of that goes in. And of course, it gets exponentially larger the more employees you have. And so that's why as companies have more and more employees, they need something more than Excel. So if you have 100 employees, Excel is probably okay for you. If you have 1,000, 10,000 employees, then you definitely need something that's going to be able to house that amount of information. Another key foundational item is artificial intelligence. Now, I am sure all of you have attended at least one session on AI or ChatGPT. So I'm not going to go into a huge amount of details about what AI is, but just know that artificial intelligence from a data analytics perspective is a really good friend for you. And it's great that a lot of tools now have this capability for it to analyze a large amount of data. Now, just for a little bit of fun, it is early in the morning, I thought I'd give you just a quick history of AI. AI as a terminology actually started in 1955, and it was John McCarthy that created that terminology that in terms of, where he put science and engineering together. But it wasn't really until 1997 when IBM created Deep Blue, which was a chess-playing computer. That's it. It just wanted to beat a human in chess. And it was in 97 when Deep Blue actually beat the world chess champion Kasparov, and it made a lot of news if you were around there. You then didn't see a whole lot of that until like 2002 when Roomba first came out. That was the first automated, autonomous vacuum, right? And it wasn't very good. It was kind of kept running into things and getting stuck. But that was the precursor to a lot what we're seeing in automated vehicles now. It was 2011 that Siri was born, and 2014 Alexa was born. I have both of those in my house now. And then we all know that 2023 is when all of us were given access to ChatGPT. And since almost 2 years ago now, we've had just a slew of other large language models that we have access to, Claude and others, which are really great time savings for all of us. And it's just going to keep getting better. Now, what's really cool about how quickly AI is going, it's going from these large language models that from a practical HR perspective has some applicability, but they're now getting to small language models and micro language models, and that's where it'll start really revolutionizing some of our really mundane tasks like policy creation or policy following and whatnot. So I'm really excited about what that's going to look like. Now, business intelligence. Your organization, if you have a finance organization, you probably have heard about BI, right? BI is a terminology, and it is it's the collection and analysis of data and support. And you'll might hear Power BI or Qlik or Tableau, where especially finance uses this to put large amounts of data, and they spit out their financial statements each month. And a good BI can do dashboards, and they can do reports, and they can make the data that really usable for everyone. Right. Predictive analytics. Well, this is nothing more than taking the historical data and using models to figure out what the future is going to look like. For us, that's turnover, for example, right? What's our historic turnover? What's happening in the environment? How's our revenue doing? And it can then predict what future turnover might look like. So it basically helps forecasting, right? Workforce plans and hiring strategies. That's really some of the tools that can give us predictive analytics. Data visualization is one of the things that is really important for us as HR professionals. It's one thing to have some data. It's another to be able to put it into a visual that anybody can understand quickly and ascertain what the data is saying. Right? And most of the tools that we talked about, the BI tools will have this capability. Even Excel has charts and graphs and heat maps and that kind of stuff that you can leverage, and you should. So Excel is your best friend because we don't in HR usually we're not dealing with so much data that we can't use Excel. There are times, however. So let's define HR analytics. So those are some foundational things. We're going to get into HR, and it's really just measuring the success and failure of the employee's performance for the company. Right? It's not a big crazy thing to think about, but the key is how do you connect that to the organization and what they value. So I want to share 5 things of why we should care about HR analytics. The first is decision making, informed decision making. I remember when I first took over payroll, and it was a horrible. We had a horrible track record. Lots of complaints from employees. We weren't able to do the payroll processing well. Lots of mistakes. Well, it was with a engineering manufacturing company, and in the plants they used defects per million as a manufacturing concept. And I thought, okay, that's something that the leadership could understand in terms of the number of transactions and how many were right versus wrong. And so did a lot of, got people smarter than me to figure out how to create a defects per million calculation. And so we were able to do that, and I took that to the leadership and said, hey, look, we've got a 10% defect per million in payroll. This is a problem. We got to fix it. And so because I had taken that data, which in and of itself, if I said, hey, I had 100 payroll issues, they might have gone, okay, fine, just fix it. Don't worry about it. But I put it into the language that they cared about. And then it allowed me to make some better decisions and then get approvals to put in some of the solutions. Strategic alignment. If we're measuring the right things that the business cares about, then everything that we do from an HR perspective, we can ensure that we're aligned with the business, and that's really important to get the seat at the table, right? If we're off doing some things that are good for HR, but it's not aligned to where the company is going, then you're not going to have quite as much success. So HR analytics done well will be aligned. All right, talent strategy enhancement. I mentioned at the beginning that talent management strategies produce some really good business results, and so if we're managing the data correctly, then we're looking at skills and competencies and skill gaps and gap closing actions and all of those things that will help drive the business results. Trends and patterns. So employee surveys generally have been a good way to see a trend or pattern. Whoops, what happened? Got it. And so I remember I put in a pulse survey, quarterly pulse survey, 1999, so about a year before COVID. And when COVID hit and we started having furlough employees and whatnot, I thought, wow, our employee engagement is going to go down. To my surprise, it went up. And I had a trend. Fortunately, I had 5 quarters of data to really look at before I saw that COVID data. Well, I had to go in and take a look at why in the world did the employee engagement go up while we were going through this rough time. Well, it came down to one thing. Once we did an analysis, the CEO started making short 5-minute videos that he would release on a weekly basis. And that communication with all employees during that time encouraged everybody, engaged everybody. They felt like they knew what was going on, and they just knew that it was it was a place that they wanted to hang out. And so the data just went through the roof, which was fantastic. And so we kept tracking it. By the time 2021 came around, the CEO slowed down his communication, and eventually he stopped doing videos altogether, and maybe he would do a email or something. But by the time Q2 2021 wrapped around, the numbers came back down. And it was like, okay. It was such a great learning because all the challenges with COVID and HR really saved most organizations during COVID. I believe that with all my heart, but it gave me a really good snapshot of how important communication was, and was able to bring that data to the CEO and say, hey, look, we need to do this. If you want a quick engagement, then that's important. So having data analytics and having the data, getting the trends and patterns is really valuable. Now, the last reason why we care about analytics is everything that we do, we should be thinking about return on investment, right? If you talk to most executives, and even CEOs, they're going to go, yeah, that's nice to do, but if there's not going to be an investment on the costs that they're going to spend, well then, guess what? You're not going to get the mind share from them. But because a lot of them think, oh, HR is just a cost center, right? I mean, but we're not. We have a strategic value that we can give to the organization. So I learned early that everything that I wanted to do, I always put through the lens of an ROI. And of course, we can drive a lot of cost savings as well. And so not just our own departments, because I am fully aware that we are under budget and under resourced, and it's gotten even worse the last couple of years as companies have struggled a little bit. So it's not just about how can we be more efficient internally and reduce that headcount, but there's a lot of costs that we oversee, benefits, insurance, those kind of things. How do we make that better? But ultimately, we care about analytics because that is how executives think. They think in terms of data. And if we can use the data to tell our story and align it to the business, we can really benefit. All right. So I'd like to give five pieces of ideas of how you can get a seat at the table using HR analytics. I know you can all relate where you are in this situation. It's like, oh my gosh, I just asked the question. I don't want to seem like I'm completely off. And you're sitting there, Google or now ChatGPT. Tell me about this. I remember when I was interviewing for a job, actually as a quality manager in corporate finance. This is an accounts payable, so not necessarily HR, but I had worked at GM. I did an internship with GM, so I understood total quality management and whatnot. But they wanted to bring me in to do some quality programs and initiatives within accounts payable. And I realized that I knew statistical process control. I knew some stuff, but I didn't really understand the breadth of it. I'm dating myself, but this was pre, Google and internet. So I went to the local bookstore, picked up a book on total and quality management, and it had the different philosophies of management and some tools and tricks and whatnot. So I crammed all weekend to sit down with the corporate controller, and he's like, okay, well, tell me about, quality. And I'm like, oh, well, would you like to know about Deming or Duran? And they, that was enough for them to go, okay, fine, you're hired. The nice thing is, right now, you have an opportunity to learn about analytics and learn about some of the things that are really, really important for executives to be able to do that now so you're not having to cram. I probably have crammed more than I should have through my career. So if we take some time to think like the business, first and foremost, we have to know how the business makes money. What contributes to the bottom line? And if we can do that, then we can align everything that we do to help the business make money. Now, unless you're in a nonprofit, like a true nonprofit, companies are about making money. I mean, they need to make money so that they can make payroll and all of that stuff. Even nonprofits need to make money. They just do it in a different way. Cost of goods sold, operating expense, EBITDA, OpEx. If you don't know those terms, then you don't realize, like, oh, well, with revenue from an HR perspective, I can go hire a better salesperson or better customer service person that's going to serve the customer, that's going to drive revenue. Or on the cost of goods sold, I can go and figure out what the absentee rate of the manufacturing is so that I can help reduce absenteeism, which will then reduce overtime. And we all know overtime is more expensive, and so that way cost of goods sold is going to be lower, right? Understanding the P&L can help you work through and use your analytics and focus to put your analytics where is going to be valuable and tell the story for the business. Now, telling story is so vital because, except for someone who just is a data junkie, data in itself doesn't really resonate. I do know people that can look at a spreadsheet and see where the calculation error is wrong, and I bless them because that is way beyond my capability. But if you can tell the story, I took a role as a VP of talent for a retailer. And retail turnover is expected. The average turnover is like 67, 68% of stores. Well, when I stepped in, the stores were running over 100% turnover a year. Now, we all know that the more turnover, the more training, the less productive those employees are. And so it was a big problem, obviously. And usually they would say, well, we just need to get more resumes in so that the store managers can call and make sure that they're just hiring people and they're turning. We looked at all the data, and none of it was really telling us why we were seeing such a big amount of turnover compared to the average. Well, it wasn't until we actually started looking at the resumes and seeing where the employees were coming from that weren't lasting more than a couple months. Well, it turned out they were coming from fast food, and so they were trying to get out of fast food, step into retail, just any kind of retail, and then using that to parlay into more exciting retail stores and opportunities. And once we understood where that was coming, then we changed our focus of where we were going to go hire from and what kind of employees that we really wanted and what kind of candidates we were looking for. We were able to tell that story, and so we got approval to go get money for employee value proposition and do some different things in talent acquisition. We need to make sure that not only are we making database decisions, but your whole team is making database decisions. Because if it's just you may be getting the promotions and you may be able to speak with executives, but our role in HR is to make sure everybody in HR gets elevated. And so if we're ensuring that our whole teams are thinking about data, then we're doing better for everybody. And then finally is, it's one thing if we're thinking about data in our teams, but we really want to influence the business. And so if we understand how the business makes money, what the P&L is, what data the businesses care about, then when we're sitting down with the other parts of the business, we should be asking them about their data. And if we can do that, then all of a sudden we start getting some influence. And by the way, if as part of your continuing education, if you'd like to have a one-on-one after the session, I'd love to spend some time free of charge to just talk about your specific scenarios. Just after the session, give me your Jeremy. Raise your hand, your business card, and we'll get connected. All right, now let's get into some of my practical experience in HR analytics specifically. Now, HR analytics is, there's a lot of data that we can put forward, and some of it's good, some of it's not. I remember as a child living in Mexico, my brother and I were invited to a birthday party, and they had a piñata. It was the first time that we'd ever seen a piñata, and the prospect of hitting this thing while blindfolded and then getting candy was amazing. I think I was 7 years old at the time. And so my brother had the opportunity to be blindfolded first, being, had never done it, and he was older than I was, so he got that opportunity. They blindfolded him, spun him around, he had his stick, he swung a few times, and all of a sudden he connected with something, and it made a crack. Well, all of us thought, oh, great, the candy is right there, which is exactly what he thought, so he kept hitting. Well, the problem was it wasn't the piñata, it was a wooden plaque on the wall. So sometimes we put forth data that we think, oh, this is great, but it's really not going to give you that candy, those goodies, that information that is going to help drive the right behaviors and decisions going forward. So I spent 18 years at Intel. I love 2x2 matrix. So anytime that you have you're just not sure how to visually do something, just create a 2x2 matrix, right? So on one side here, it's analytical insights. What data is going to give us the best information that we need? And then on the other is, what's the value to the business, right? So I thought, okay, this will work. So in this lower left-hand corner, we have the low value to the business, fairly low analytical insight. So this is kind of the HR service delivery, maybe technology usage. I remember when we put in Workday, we wanted to track how many people are using it, what percentage are using Workday. Well, is it important information? Yeah. Is it really going to drive anything like significantly different? Probably not. But as an HR, this is internal HR data. This is stuff that we probably should be doing because it's going to help us just be better at what we do. Quadrant 2 is better analytical insight, but still maybe not quite the value to the business that you're really looking for. So this might be, this is a lot of backward-looking stuff. So this might be labor costs, for example. Important stuff, for sure, but in and of itself doesn't necessarily drive anything to the business. Then we have quadrant 3, which is higher value to the business, but not necessarily the high analytical insight. It's not gonna be tied to those things that we talked about earlier in the session. So this might be things like skill gaps and culture fit and whatnot. Definitely important. Definitely a value to the business. Culture, we know, is value to the business. But where you really want to be is this quadrant 4. High value to the business and a lot of strategic insight. Workforce readiness, retention, engagement, proactive operating expense reduction, top talent data. So it's a simple model to figure out, okay, well, what data is good for us? Where do we want to focus? I know when I started, almost everything that I did was in this quadrant 1, and I suspect that a lot of y'all have a lot of good quadrant 1 data. And I'll share some of what's in quadrant 1 in a second. But really, what we want to be is quadrant 4. Now, it's not to say that we won't have analytics and data in each one of these quadrants. But what ones is the business going to care most about? It's going to be the ones that you can that you have up in that top quadrant. Those are the ones that the board's going to care about, the CEO is going to care about. So let's dive in a little bit of what some of these could be. It's not an exhaustive list. We could probably debate on is something a quadrant 1 or quadrant 3, but this is really to get you thinking about what is the data that you're using and why, and what behavior is it and is it driving. So quadrant 1, absentee rate, overtime hours. those are really good. They can help HR do a lot of things. Time to hire, it's important, for sure. If you're in talent acquisition, you want that to be shorter. Now, what you do with it could move that into a different quadrant, for sure. EEO reporting, definitely important, but is that really going to drive revenue? Might cost if you got a lot of them, but that compliance and whatnot. So there's things here in that quadrant 1 that are important, but may not be really. They're the things that HR has historically been tracking, and I think we want to go beyond that. Quadrant 2, that cost per hire, HR-driven cost savings, employee satisfaction surveys, employee turnover. Good data to have for sure. You can start getting a lot of information from this because it definitely has some analytical insights. Quadrant 3, you start getting items that are important for the business. And so that's workforce planning, time to productivity. You hire someone, how quickly are they going to be really up and running? How's the quality of hire? How long are they staying once you do hire them? Right? Those things are really important because if you're going to spend money to train them, I've seen data on new hires that a professional level role might cost you $50,000 when it's all said and done for the lost time, lost productivity, training, all of that stuff. It could be upwards to $50K. Well, having a quality hire that's going to have a lower ramp-up time is going to be really valuable to the business. And then quadrant 4. This is where I found most of the board is interested in. Succession pipeline, leadership effectiveness, top talent turnover. Right? Those are things. Now, we know, and lots of studies have done some work on top talent. Top talent can produce anywhere from 2 to 8 times more productivity than your average employee. I'm always surprised by the higher percentage, but then I think about it. Would you rather have a team of 3 really top talent employees or a team of 10 average employees? Well, you'd rather have the 3 top talent because you know it's going to get done and quickly. So here's what that kind of looks like. Again, I encourage you to take your own. Make your own model out of it. You can plug in your own analytics, metrics that you measure, and just ask yourself, is it of value to the business? Now, at minimum, whatever you are measuring, you should be doing something with. If you're not doing something with something that you're measuring, do yourself a favor and save some time. All right. So let me give you some real examples of models that I've used for in my work to CEOs, to boards, to presidents. This is a model of a talent management trend that I put together. The board wanted to see this. They wanted to see turnover. So, while that may not have significant analytical insights and value to the business, it was important to the board. So, by golly, I was going to track that. But it also had top talent turnover, percent of critical roles filled by top talent. Right? If your most important roles aren't filled by top talent, then gosh, that's a challenge. I love the velocity of top talent, right? Because we know that top talent is going to be able to find a job outside. So the quicker that we're able to get them up to speed and fully productive, and then giving them their next career step within the organization is is really, really important. So this is just one graphical representation. And you can see it's red, yellow, green. You can look at this chart and you can know how are we doing very, very quickly. Right? Yes?
Your objective, where did you arrive at those?
Some of it is benchmark. Some of it was, you know what? Like the top talent velocity. We were like, let's, when we did this, it was like, well, every 3 years, if they were getting promoted and moved out, that's probably a good, transition point. Now, I think if I were to do this now, it might be closer to 50%. So every 2 years, that top talent is getting a new opportunity. So some of it was just kind of what's the scenario and situation, and some of it. Certainly things like turnover and whatnot, you can use the industry's best practices. Okay. Here's one that I did. That's a simple heat map, and you could color code these, but the CEO and the board wanted to understand what was the leadership capability of the different organizations across the company. So, did a lot of discussions with leaders, with employees, looking at performance data, looking at the top, talent management data, how many top talent, what's in the succession pipeline for these different functions, and kind of built out, where they were. So when I was initially asked to do it, it was the left-hand side, and that's what it was. And so the ones in the blue were important for us, and so that's where we decided to focus. We put a lot of energy into developing the commercial teams and the service departments, and that really allowed us to move that information. Just putting it out there to the leaders and the board put a focus on, okay, you know what, we need to develop our leaders. Well, we also know that strong leadership gives us 2.2 times higher what was it? Revenue, cash flow. I lost my train of thought on that one. So, but you can see over time, I think this is a 3-year kind of horizon. Everything moved up, which was awesome. All of y'all have probably done talent reviews, or at least seen the 9 box. We can debate the validity of doing talent reviews. I'm still a fan of them. And I know there's some science and some things that are a challenge with it, but it's something simple that leaders can understand. And if you look at, hey, I want more top talent and less lower performing, lower potential talent, that's not a bad thing. And so you can see that this is a trend over time of how we are doing. And, especially moving that lower row up into, the higher rows, it's a great visual for the board and the executives and managers, frankly, to see. And then one of my favorites was a succession plan. And I have a love-hate relationship with creating succession plans, because earlier in my career in HR, I would sit down with the leaders, and they'd say, okay, here's who's on my ready now, ready 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years. Come back next year, the same list, the same names are in the same box. Come back 3 years from now, the same names in the same box. Like, wait a second, that 1 to 3 year hasn't moved. How come? But so when I had the opportunity to create a succession model for country managers. And this was at a big CPG company. And the country managers were and are a critical role. And so we overlaid a number of aspects that actually put some real data behind the succession process. So we certainly looked at performance, and we looked at where are they in the talent review process, but we also looked at 4 critical experiences that they needed as they grew from a small country to a medium country to a large country. One of those being, are you willing to relocate? Because if you're not willing to relocate from one country to go to another country, from Nicaragua to Philippines, well, then you may be a great employee, but you're not necessarily going to be on that succession plan for that next size country. And so by building this out, we're able to really see who's got all the experience, who are the top talent, and by doing this, we actually identified a couple of individuals that were stuck in smaller countries that really needed to be supercharged into their career. One of them is now a CEO of a large company, and another became a regional president for this company. So, but it was because we built this model that really helped us identify the important things of succession. Right? And this was something that I did. I've always felt the need for HR driving cost savings. So this is a simple Excel spreadsheet that I had all of my HR employees think about what can they do to drive hard savings and even soft savings to some extent for the business, right? And so they would put their idea and how much they thought they could save, and so we then started tracking it, and we created a goal for the team, and this was my way of getting the whole team to think about data. Now, this is just a simple spreadsheet, and I'd be happy to share this template with anybody who would like to have it. Just come up afterwards, give us your contact information, and I'll be happy to get this sent out to you. Now, I started the presentation walking into the CEO's office. And hopefully you're on the edge of your seat, wondering, what happened? Did I do something wrong? Did I get fired? Well, no, I didn't get fired. But as I sat down, the CEO, we had just closed this multi-billion-dollar deal. And he said, we have a problem. We had finally gotten in to really understand that instead of 120 million EBITDA, they were going to come in at $80 million, which totally blew the investment thesis out of the water. So I was really relieved that I hadn't done anything wrong. Until it hit me that, oh my gosh, I now have a $100 million synergy target that the CEO was putting on my shoulders. Now, fortunately, I had enough confidence in my analysis that I felt like we could very, kind of easily get to that $75-80 million range, and so it just meant that I really only had to go find about 20 million more. So step back, pulled all the stakeholders together. We started combing through all the data, and we came up. We actually identified about $150 million worth of opportunities. Now, a big chunk of that was plant consolidation, because we had 30 plants, they had 20 plants. consolidating plants, the larger footprint versus having to replicate everything on smaller, that was going to be a $25-30 million savings. Now, the problem with that was private equity wants everything to happen within a year, right? If you're a public company, a 3-year, 5-year ROI is perfectly okay, but private equity better be a year, or you're not going to get the capital needed to then go do, get that ROI. To get the $25 million, it was going to take 3 years, and the PE said, no, that's just not going to work. So that was going to be my saving grace. So we had to really scrape and whatnot. I was given 2 years to do it. First year, we were able to get $58 million in synergies, and we were well on track year 2 until inflation started to go up, right? So I was counting on, we used a lot of the same raw material, right? So you start combining raw material of two, $700-800 million businesses. You now have $1.5 billion business. You can go and negotiate better rates to your suppliers for your raw materials. Well, everything started going up, and so we eventually got there, but it was really really challenging and stressful. And these are a couple of charts that I used on that particular project. So because it was a merger of sorts, we had 4,000 employees. They brought in close to 5,000 employees. We had over 2,000 lines of, ask you about big data or BI, you at least have a little bit better understanding of what that is and why HR analytics is important, and certainly how you can have more influence with the leadership team using HR analytics, and then some practical ways to think about the HR data that can help you get that seat at the table, and then some graphical ways that you might be able to track that. So with that, I want to, before I forget, I am going to be having a book signing. So my second book is going to be is the Talent Advantage, and it's a story of a CEO's journey to understand the importance and value of talent. And so if you've read any of Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, it's written as a story and then teaching about some different models. So this is a story about a CEO that is having problems with quality and customer service. They lose their biggest customer, and he doesn't know why. He can't figure it out. And so he meets a HR consultant that asks him the questions, well, have you considered it might be your people that are the problem? And of course he hadn't. And so it's the journey of the CEO discovering the importance of talent, leadership, understanding who he has and their capabilities, and some of the things hard things he needs to do, like deselect people and give opportunities to others, and see how his business turns around. And you'll have to read it to see if there's a happy ending. But so I'll be. They have the books in the back for purchase, and I'll be there to sign them. But with that, I'd love to open it up for any questions. Yes, sir.
Could you actually go back in your slides to the model that showed whenever you first went through this process in identifying those that you have with the blue, right? One, I'm assuming that was known when you started. You said we are going to identify these, and it wasn't necessarily based off of who was the lowest performing and who had the lowest leadership competencies. I'm guessing it was like potential to drive revenue or potential to drive something else that made those your targets. Here's my question.
Okay.
When you looked at this and said, we're about to do X in order to get Y, show them anything like this model, like here's where all our people are at, here's the people that we're targeting? Or was this something that y'all kind of discovered through data throughout the process?
So this was, we were asked by the CEO to give him a sense of what the organization capability was for each of the major functions within the company. Right? So it was an initial request by the CEO because he wondered, he knew that there were certain functions that weren't necessarily performing at the level that they needed to, but he couldn't articulate what it was or why. So that's when I went in and really dug into the data. You know, well, let's take supply chain. Okay, well, supply chain being manufacturing and procurement and whatnot. Okay, well, how are they doing with cost of goods sold and managing the costs? How are they doing with procurement costs? Do they have a succession plan? Who's on that? How deep is that? Right. So that's when we started looking at the data for each of the organizations, and this isn't a perfect graphical science representation. It was really just to say, hey, best everything that we can tell based on the talent that they have, the performance that they're doing as an organization, looking at their data, this is about where they would fall. Right? So that's how we started. It was simple, right? We didn't have to do anything complicated with it. And then we just tracked that over the years, and they continue to evolve. This was just the last year that I was there and had that data. So they may have continued it. I don't know, but it was certainly, we did a whole lot in terms of talent and leadership development. We pulled people into a cohort, a 9-month cohort where we developed the top talent, did some kind of tiger team initiatives. We did a number of things to give them the experience and exposure to drive their leadership. And so over time, we saw an improvement. Is it still, is that still perfect? Well, it's probably not perfect. You probably would come back and go, okay, well, let's now adjust our model, which you should do every few years anyhow. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, to some degree, yes. The only thing I guess that was missing from it is when you were looking at this, I guess, how did the information at first gathering session, like you went through an initial analysis, came with this and said, hey, here's who we're going to track over these 2 axes over the next whatever year. Was it actually, so my brain looks at this and says, oh, okay, I would assume special attention is paid to with IT procurement, right? Just because of where they are, and you want everyone performing at least, to some degree better than that.
Yeah.
Right, but then I hear, well, where we were targeting was actually marketing, service departments, and commercial.
Well, that's where the CEO really wanted some focus because we needed to grow the business, and so those were going to be. IT was not a strategic priority for the CEO, and so it never became one. No, you saw it grow because they had some top talent that we did some investment in, but that's not where the main focus was, right? Procurement grew and whatnot. So, but that's it was where the CEO wanted to focus, and we sat down with each of these leaders. These were different leaders on the leadership team, and we sat down. And they knew what we were doing, so we made sure that it was open. Yeah.
Could you go back to the quadrant with the examples? It's just really timely for. I just want to take a quick picture.
Yeah, for sure. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you. Oh, one more, yay.
I just wanted to know if you use like standard, like a dashboard that the managers have access to, that they could go in on regular reporting each month, and then HR didn't really necessarily have to be involved other than, analyzing the data, maybe help them understand the data, but that they had regular access to make their own decisions on.
I have done that. I didn't. Workday's got some really good dashboards. One of my favorite dashboards that I had built when I was the HR director in Japan, built a cost per employee, and we did a leadership survey. 10 questions. How well is your leader doing in these 10 attributes, and we would publish that on a quarterly basis so that the manager could go in and see how they're doing, how their organization is doing, how's the employee cost doing, do they need to do something different. So that was a fun dashboard to put out. But if you have a Workday or some of the new tools, absolutely pushed leaders into those dashboards and saying, hey, if you want real-time data, go there. These were really, this is really data that I would generate for like a board meeting or CEO once a quarter kind of a thing. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. I will. What's that?
So let's give Jeff a big round of applause.